Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. It looks like, in private at least, that the SNP have given up on the Rutherglen and Hamilton West seat. This, of course, is the seat that will be vacated by Margaret Ferrier if she gets her 30-day ban. She's currently appealing it, but it's not likely to go to win the appeal, put it that way. It will go through. There will be a recall election. They need 10% of the electorate to ask for it, and both Labour and the Conservatives have been out in force and can guarantee that they will get the 10% threshold. So if the 30-day ban is upheld, there will be an election. And the SNP are fully aware, like the rest of us, that they're likely going to lose it. And this has been compounded by a staffer saying about how cushy a seat it will be for Labour. Let's have a look at this article and see why they have given it up already. Although they've got a few more that they're going to be prepared to give up soon, I suspect, as well. Anyway, here goes. So the SNP are admitting defeat in pivotal Rutherglen by-election as a staffer hints at a cushy seat. Shamed Margaret Ferrier could be set to lose her seat through a recall election, leaving Scottish Labour and the SNP to scrap it out in Humza Yousaf's first big challenge as leader. Now this, of course, is South Lanarkshire. We've got enough problems, as it were, in North Lanarkshire, and that is likely to bleed. You will have sort of feature creep, if you will. People in South Lanarkshire will look at what's happening in North Lanarkshire and think, you know, do we really want the SNP in charge? Given that the SNP are likely to lose the council election there, because they have this this awful councillor, Jordan Linden, who resigned. He had an interesting event involving a teenager, shall we say. He had to resign, but the people who brought this out, of course, in North Lanarkshire, they've then subsequently been punished by the party. Some have been fired. You know, they've been thrown out the party. Others then quit in disgust at this. So there's all sorts of shenanigans going on in North Lanarkshire. And now you've got this in South Lanarkshire, also an SNP problem. And so people will be looking at the SNP and thinking, actually, you know what? I'm going to drift away from them. I'm going to sort of start... Now, you're still going to get your hard-eyed, wobbling-eyed loons. They'll still vote. But a lot of people, the normies, as we call, the ones who just sort of kind of lent them the vote because they kind of want independence, but they're not sort of hardcore SNP. I think they will drift away, and I don't think the SNP can possibly win this seat because of that sort of overall atmosphere of terribleness, really. But anyway, the SNP have been accused of admitting defeat already in the impending Rutherglen by-election after a staffer claimed that the Labour candidate was heading for a cushy seat at Westminster. Disgraced former Nationalist MP Margaret Ferrier is facing a recall petition in the South Lanarkshire region after getting a train from London to Glasgow after testing positive for COVID. Her Rutherglen and Hamilton West will be a key battleground for the upcoming general election, as Scottish Labour and the SNP will do battle. And I do formally think that Scottish Labour will win this. I'll put my hand up. If there is an election, you can refer back to this video. I definitely think Labour will win this one. I think it's gone past the tipping point for the SNP, certainly in this particular seat. The winner will offer a firm indication of whether the tide is turning in Scotland and if Scottish Labour can take up to 20 seats from the Nationalists next year, which would completely change the whole face of Scottish politics. You would lose that independence-driven taint on everything. And I'm not saying that Labour are particularly good, but at least when they're wrong, they won't be wrong because of independence and that nationalism fervour and fury. They'll be wrong because of general level incompetence. I don't think I'm protecting anyone. The Tories would be just as bad. The Lib Dems would be just as bad. The Greens would be way worse. But, you know, at least if they're going to fail, they'll fail differently. Although Ferrier has appealed the Commons ban, that would trigger a by-election. Scottish Labour selected their candidate for the seat on Tuesday night, as trade unionist Michael Shanks defeated Maureen Devlin, Dina Tissera and Greg Irwin in a vote of local members. I'm presuming that this Michael Shanks isn't the Michael Shanks who plays Daniel Jackson in Stargate. If it was, hell, that'd be a hell of a change of occupation, wouldn't it? And this was it was this vote that provoked one SNP staffer to suggest that the choice would lead to a cushy seat for for Mr Shanks at the expense of his own party. Jack ONeill, you're kidding me. Jack ONeill, the leader of Stargate. Oh my God. Anyway, Jack ONeill, whose Twitter profile says he works in the press office for the Nationalists, took a shot at Miss Tissera, who is an Aberdeen councillor, applying for a seat 148 miles away. Parachuted in, you see. They want these people parachuted in. They don't know the constituency. They don't know anything about it. But this is what happens, and it happens. It's not just a Scottish problem; it's an English problem, it's a Welsh problem. It's probably, I'd say, it's probably a Northern Irish problem, but Northern Ireland's very small. You don't have 148 miles. You can't get 148 miles away in the north of Ireland. It's not big enough. Anyway, he wrote, Dina Tissera tried so hard to abandon the constituents that elected her in Aberdeen for a cushy seat in Westminster, and only got 2 votes. Now she's got, of course, slope all the way back to Aberdeen and explain why she was ready to abandon them because she feels, thinks of contemptuous reasons. I've been to Aberdeen. I've had a bloody good night out in Union Street. It was cracking. One of the biggest beaches I think I've ever seen in my life. Certainly, if I was the MP for Aberdeen, I'd be proud to be an Aberdeen MP. I wouldn't be running away. Or not. She's a councillor, of course, but even so, Aberdeen's a fine place. But her comment was highlighted by a number of Scottish Labour supporters who queried whether this was an admittance of defeat in the hotly contested seat. The Rutherglen Labour Party wrote, a cushy seat in Westminster, is that an admission of defeat from the SNP press office? Confirmation, if ever you needed it, that they're terrified of a resurgent Labour Party. And they truly are. Because they know it's Labour are the only ones who can defeat them in Scotland, and Labour are likely, if not to win overall majority, but they're likely to cut their majority massively. They will eat in. I mean, the estimates at the moment, based on the polls, are 20 seats coming from the SNP to Labour. That must frighten the SNP to a point where, if it actually happened, I think Humza Yousaf's position as leader would be completely untenable. He would have to tender his resignation. And if they were wise, they'd accept it. Laura McConnell added, cushy seat in Westminster, SNP press office admitting defeat already. While Chris Roherty said, cushy seat in Westminster, obviously the SNP establishment don't think they'll win the by-election. Meanwhile, Liam Reid wrote, does the SNP press office think, A, they can't win the by-election, B, their 47 MPs are just freeloaders riding cushy jobs, and C, both? Oh, it's definitely C, isn't it? Definitely C, because none of these people get a job in the real world. Aidan Kerr pointed out that it was interesting to see the SNP press office thinks a prospective Scottish Labour candidate in a parliamentary by-election would be heading for a cushy seat in Westminster. The Nationalists are defending a 9.7% majority of plus 5,000 votes. So, it's not a great majority. It's certainly enough that Labour feel they can win, and they can put this woman, Margaret Ferrier, out of a job. And that'd be no bad thing. She's betrayed people. She passes rules. She was one of those who voted for these rules about no movement during COVID, and then immediately breaks her own rules and travels, not just during the COVID pandemic, but with actual COVID. So yeah, stand and hold them accountable to their own standards. MPs on the Standards Committee had recommended a 30-day sanction, which would trigger a recall election in her constituency, but the disgraced independent MP decided to appeal it. Ferrier lost the SNP whip when it was revealed she had breached COVID rules. It's funny, you can lose the SNP whip for breaching COVID rules, but if you're touching up teenagers, you only get it for 6 months and then you're back in the fold. Goes to show where their priorities lie, doesn't it? She was sentenced in court to carry out 270 hours of community service. That's exactly the same as what you get for R-ing a child in Scotland. So travelling with COVID in Scottish courts, travelling with COVID is exactly the same as R-ing a child. Wow, they've got their priorities really straight, haven't they? In September 2020, she travelled by train from Glasgow to London while awaiting the results of a COVID test. She took part in a House of Commons debate before travelling home after finding out she was positive. And there we go. So there she goes. She will be replaced. She's out. She's done. She's finished. And it's likely to be a Labour win. Michael Shanks presumably coming back with Jack ONeill from that latest Stargate mission, apparently. I see this man on your left there, Anna Sawar. He has played a blinder because he has kept his mouth shut. He's nobody. He is a nobody. But by not speaking, he isn't upsetting and annoying people, and so his actual rating has gone slightly up. It's amazing, isn't it? If only all politicians would learn. If you keep your mouth shut, people don't mind. Anyway, I shall round off and come up. So if we assume that the authorities in Westminster do decide to uphold the ban, then it won't take long. It'll be a matter of weeks before the election is called. I think it'll be a 4-week campaign. And so we could be looking, let's say, end of June, early July, something like that. No later, I'd imagine, no later than July. We can have this election, and it is undoubted that Labour will win. And that will not only reduce the SNP... Now, technically, it won't reduce the SNP majority because she is currently standing as an independent. However, she always votes with the SNP. So that will be one vote that they won't guarantee a win. So it's a technical loss of a majority. But, of course, it also means that the Labour gain one. So they become like the next, even closer to them. It means that the swing at the next election doesn't have to be quite so big, which means it's more achievable. And it means that those 20 seats going at the next election all of a sudden look ever so slightly easier. And that will make for some very uncomfortable reading, not just in the SNP generally, but in the Yousaf household of a morning. He'll be sitting there sweating over his cornflakes. And I shall stop. Thank you very much for listening. If you like what you see here on the channel, please hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well. Let's hope that this by-election does come to fruition. And goodbye.